Our contribution comes from the women's health sector and from a research perspective. 7 years ago, Kerry Burns and I were interviewing a woman in her home for a research about women leading violent relationships. Sharona, not her real name, said this: "The worst thing that happened was when I was 7.5 months pregnant with my baby. We'd been to the pub and I wanted to watch a baby video, which was due back the next day. It caused a fight and he ended up throwing things all over Mum's house. Mum slapped him gently and said, 'Behave yourself.' I didn't want to get Mum involved, so I said we should go home. Mum didn't want me to go. On the way home he said, 'I'm not going to bash you, but you're going to pay.' He started to be intimate when we got home and then just got violent and wanted anal sex. I said no, and he punched and punched and punched me, and he raped me anally. He did it for 15 minutes and then he said, 'Get up, dog, and go and have a shower.' I was in the shower and just kept thinking, thank God it's over. And he came in and told me to touch my toes. He started again and said, 'Take this, dog.' We can only imagine the deep hurt to Sharona. And hearing this affects us too, as researchers, counsellors, policymakers, as people. An important, if overlooked aspect of all of our work is to acknowledge the effect on us as workers as we try to expose the problem. We're people too, and disturbed by the things we hear. The research team is often a faceless and nameless entity, so today I name some of the workers involved. The ethics committee that approved our research was alert to this potential harm and insisted that 2 researchers be present at the interviews to allow for attention to the woman and care for each other. The post-interview debriefs were a welcome reprieve. After hearing Sharona's account, Kerry and I wondered if much was known about partner rape. We looked into it. It seemed that not much was written in Australia. This was clearly our next research project. By 2008, when we were ready to start, Kerry had moved on to manage Upper Murray Casa. With no external funding forthcoming, Women's Health Goulburn North East financially supported the project, and Kerry assisted with interviews and acted as a critical friend. Final year social work student Sue Cohen wrote the literature review to 2007 during her placement with us. It's in the report and available on the website. Women's Health Vic assisted with my efforts last week to update the lead search. After filtering the 171 records down to 90, the articles are mostly from the US, with some referring to Hispanic, Latino, African American communities. Other articles were from Australia and from the UK, the UN, Canada, from Norway, Spain, Paraguay, India, Pakistan, Turkey and South Africa. As you can see from the slide, most, 31, were a mix of qualitative and quantitative survey reports. 13 were analyses of secondary data and 7 were lit reviews. And there's a few others in there too. The articles covered a range of topics from general overviews and prevalence reports to community perceptions of partner rape, to causes and perpetrator profiles, cultural implications and prevention. A number of articles focused on the role of drugs and alcohol in the perpetration of the assaults and their use by women as they try to cope with the problem. 5 articles considered how sexual violence by a partner intersects with women's reproductive rights. In one, US-based Judith McFarlane writes that future research should explore women's control of their sexuality, how and when we should ask women about rape, and how to include males as a solution to ending it. In 2010, T.L. de Bocanegra interviewed 53 women in US refuges who reported that their abusive partners frequently refused to use condoms, impeded them from accessing health care, and subjected them to birth control sabotage, infidelity and forced sex. Yet the women also recorded strategies they used to combat this, and the article concludes with advice for counsellors to focus on these successful strategies to validate women's coping skills and build self-esteem. A strong theme amongst the articles is the association between HIV and STIs and partner rape, and the implications for mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder and suicide. Another thread studies relationship dynamics and marital satisfaction. And David Hewison, in a 2009 article, uses psychoanalytic theory to consider partner rape. So I'll just have a sip of water for this quote. Of particular interest to us today are the articles on women's health-seeking behaviour and effective responses and treatments. In 2007, US researcher Whitaker described trying to implement a network model for providing culturally competent partner rape services. And in 2010, Rebecca Macy interviewed 14 managers of US DV and sexual assault services. She presents findings under 4 headings: critical services for survivors, essential service delivery practices, ideal services that are challenging to deliver because of funding and other barriers, and areas of uncertainty due to lack of best practice. The paper written by Jill Duncan and Deb Weston, addressing the ultimate insult, is the most relevant, specific, comprehensive, and the most practical of the 90 papers, and you'll hear more later this morning from the authors. And I'm not just saying that because they're here. Finally, although published in 2006, Real Rape, Real Pain by McCorman, Plummer and Estill was reviewed as an excellent training tool for workers to begin to understand the relationship between rape and DV, and invaluable to women dealing with rape as part of their experiences. The annotated bibliography of the 90 articles will be made available if you're interested. For all of us working in the area of violence against women, it's easy to assume that others know what we know and understand what we understand. It's seductive to think our job is done. But in 2011, the world is still one that's characterised by gender inequality and violence against women. For example, the BBC reported on the 16th of April 2009, an Afghan bill allowing a husband to starve his wife if she refuses to have sex has been published in the Official Gazette and become law. The original bill caused outrage, forcing Afghan President Hamid Karzai to withdraw it. The original bill explicitly legalised rape within marriage and was condemned by Barack Obama and Gordon Brown. This one, though, is apparently okay. There was certainly no outcry from the Australian government and no threat to withdraw any of its troops stationed in Afghanistan, now numbering 1,500. Closer to home, one of the women who participated in this research was sexually assaulted by her husband at 24 years. Because she had evidence, of course, the case was taken to court. The Age reported on the outcome in 2008. In a rare case of such a crime going before the courts, a Wodonga man has been fined $2,500 for indecently assaulting his former wife. But despite pleading guilty, has not had a conviction recorded and has been released on a 12-month good behaviour bond. This is a man of some financial means. Clearly, the wider world does not see intimate partner sexual assault the way we in this room do. Our research team was assembled with Claire Zara and I doing most of the interviews. The aim of this research was and remains the same as today's forum's aim, to improve our responses and to raise awareness. We sought to do this by hearing women's stories. Ron Labonte, a noted expert in health promotion, stated the obvious, that all learning is through stories. Yet, in 1989, a network of feminist researchers from the Personal Narratives Group wrote, when talking about their lives, people forget a lot, exaggerate, become confused and get things wrong. Yet, they are revealing truths. These truths don't reveal the past as it actually was, aspiring to a standard of objectivity. They give us instead the truths of our experiences. Labonte agreed, saying, a person's story may not always be accurate, but it can be truthful. He explained that the stories themselves won't change policies and practice. A structured approach to questioning is needed to transform stories into narratives and hence evidence. So what's the difference? He explains, how many of you belong to a book club? So you read a good book, you get together over some red wine and goat's cheese and discuss what it really means, trying hard not to be influenced by the literary critics and reviewers who've already decided what it means or what it should have meant but didn't. The same applies to the use of stories in research and evaluation. They become narratives and hence evidence when we interrogate them. To move from description of experience to analysis of theory and practice, we need to ask a series of questions. He suggests what, why, so what, now what. That can influence policy and practice. The 15-minute DVD that we're about to watch is drawn from the 1-hour-long version funded by Westmet and based on our 2008 report, Raped by a Partner. This qualitative research, in turn, was based on consultations with 21 women, 30 police and 23 professionals, and I think you can watch it at lunchtime. So we can play the video.
Section 38 of the Crimes Act, 1958. A person must not commit rape. Penalty, level 2 imprisonment, 25 years maximum. The existence of a marriage does not constitute or raise any presumption of consent by a person to an act of sexual penetration with another person.
Shut up and take it. A sentence I know very well. I could predict it or avoid it, and all those damn things that you have to do. And you shouldn't have to do them, ever.
It happened continually from the 4th week after I had my daughter. He raped me 4 times in those 2 weeks, then continuously for 4 years. My son was conceived that way.
I couldn't move. I was in bed with my foot in a box in plaster. He wanted sex and I said no. He flew out of bed and said, you cold cut to the thing, you're my wife, you will. I think I died that minute.
It did happen more than once. It was just his right to have sex whenever he wanted it. And he had a piece of paper to say he owned me. They were the words. I have a piece of paper to say I own you. You do what I say.
What I call rape in front of a porno made my whole body sore the next day, trying to keep him off. I consider rape when someone's manhandled, dragged you, and no matter what you do, you can't get him off.
Afterwards, I felt absolutely terrible. I felt degraded. I was still in a relationship with him and still had to see him every day and live with him. It only happened once, and not again, probably because I didn't say no.
Partner rape is a crime. Rape is a crime, and it has to be seen as a crime. So it is no longer in the private terrain.
You know, is he going to come home drunk tonight? Is he going to do this to me? Is he going to do that to me? Not only does she have to worry about him coming home drunk and slightly moody, she has to worry about being raped as well.
I was in a position where I chose between having sex with him or I didn't know what was going to happen. But he was physically violent too, so that's what made me think that if I don't do this, that he may get physically violent. And because I had 3 small kids, it was just an easier way to go, to have sex with him.
This whole idea of rape in the community is it's the girl walking home from the pub at night time and she gets raped by a stranger at 2 o'clock in the morning. Whereas, you know, as we know, intimate partner rape far outweighs any of that happening.
This is real, this is significant, and this is probably happened to people around you.
Constantly being told by people what a fantastic husband I had.
During the 26 years that we were married, he was always kind and gentle. So all in all, a good citizen.
What kind of man rapes a woman? Any man, normally, it seems to me. I don't think there's any special kind of man that rapes a woman. It's certainly not the case that it's, you know, psychotic or deranged or disturbed individuals. We know that the psychological profile of men who do use sexual violence is pretty normal.
It seems like they're all good fellas, that they're decent citizens. It happens across all socio-economic levels.
It's really helpful to get away from the stereotype of offenders that they're, you know, highly violent batterers or sick. Whereas in fact your research was showing very diverse offending behaviour where you could have men who could in fact be very charming and behave very appropriately towards women in many circumstances, but then on the other hand rape their intimate partners.
I think the sense of entitlement that some men have that is really reinforced at all levels of society, that, you know, you've got a right to pursue getting laid, you know, against all objections, really makes its way into relationships.
I state the word rape. Oh no, it's just he won't take no for an answer.
But a woman is property, and that, you know, it's your right to have it. We actually lined up the statements of stranger rapists with partner rapists, and you could see the anger, the sense of entitlement, you know, the desire for power over.
The amazing thing about the research was all the women cited that their partners would not see what they had done as rape.
My ex-husband does not recognise that as rape. The tears would be just rolling down my face, and how he did not know the pain that I was in is beyond me, because he would say that he could feel the cancer there.
The vast majority of men who rape their wives, according to legal definitions, wouldn't name it as rape. The most extreme examples of that are when men are using severe physical violence against their female partners, you know, leaving bruises, leaving lacerations, you know, breaking bones, being, you know, very seriously physically and psychologically violent, holding them down, using weapons, and still don't name it as rape. And I think that speaks to us of how profoundly some men have learned to kind of rape as sexuality.
I think because it's been accepted in all communities, not just the Indigenous community.
They also get higher levels of advice to put up with rape by their churches or families.
When I told them that he was going to end up killing me, the person that I was speaking to at the time said, well, at least you'll go to heaven then. I told the doctor that it hurt a lot. Could he please tell him not to do it? And he just said that women are built for sex.
I think it's the doctor's relationship with the man which can interfere with the doctor's acceptance that you know, that's been happening. It's tolerated within a marriage because that's part of the wife's role, is that she is to provide sex for the husband.
I think another factor is a kind of widespread victim blaming, that Ours is still a sexist culture, and we're still very prepared to believe that some women like to be beaten, or that some women ask to be raped.
This really underlying powerful message is that women are responsible.
My mother didn't think it was wrong. She thought I was exaggerating, and she just told me to go back home again and put up with it.
And we learn through media and through peers and so on that pressuring or forcing someone into sex is not only legitimate but actually sexy, even exciting.
If a minority of men still feel that this is okay within intimate partner relationships, and that says something deeply worrying about the status of women in our society still.
They might actually be knocked off if they're walking down the street and it's a stranger who rapes them. They're getting a lot more sympathy, I think, half the time, or most of the time, than they would, from reporting their husband, who everyone thinks is a great bloke.
Personally, didn't mean it. He was sorry. You won't. Yeah, this is the guy that they're married or in a long-term relationship with. This person they, love, I guess. Females will endure a lot to protect their young.
If they've chosen not to report because they have an awareness that there's stigma waiting, that there's disbelief waiting, that there's ridicule waiting, and possibly a traumatic process waiting, then no one has made a choice, a proper choice to not report. They've been forced into it.
For so many women, they stand to lose so much by reporting it. They're going to lose their input into the family fund, they're going to lose their standing in the community, they're going to lose face with their girlfriends, their in-laws, their children, their school.
To name their partner as a rapist, the father of their children could be acknowledged as a rapist.
If there's any doubt, the jury will be instructed to come back with a finding of guilty.
And what I see is defence lawyers turn to a jury and say, look at her. Do you know why she's angry and flustered? Because she's a liar.
And we all said to each other, if you were the victims of sexual assault, or if a family member was, would you put them through this system? And most of us said no. We need to be reflecting that and putting more matters before the court so that they can make decisions to say that this kind of behaviour is unacceptable, and the person is charged and they are convicted and then I think serve a sentence.
Encourage the woman to come to that decision of her own accord and in her own time, and obviously if she does decide to press charges, or we will support her in that decision and through the court process as well.
In civil litigation, a lot of matters settle out of court on a confidential basis. So in civil matters, it is not always the case that the matter would run to trial, and women tend to give evidence in court far less often in a civil matter because it is highly likely that the matter would be resolved before trial.
Women are very scared that they're not going to be believed. So this is one of the areas that we want to improve, the fact that health and community services listen, ask the right questions, and then show the woman that she is being believed.
The question, what happened? How long ago did that happen? Usually get her to tell me a story. I'll sit there and listen to a story and let her tell it as much as she wants.
Even if the doctor may think that he or she has done the right thing by giving, say, the number for CASA, if they haven't actually validated what the woman has said, the woman might have that number for CASA but just think, oh, the doctor didn't believe me or the doctor's dismissed me, therefore I'm not going to make that extra effort to go and win that 1800 number.
I certainly wanted it to named, and I certainly have heard very powerful statements from other women about having it named something. And really it's also part of emptying it.
What I really have learnt that it's my role as the doctor to actually ask that question and not necessarily wait until it's forthcoming from the woman.
She said, that's right. And I went, I guess it is. I guess there was a lot of denial, a lot of just shutting down within myself.
There are a few steps that a health worker can take, and they're quite simple. We say first, ask about women's safety. It can be as simple as, are you safe at home? We think that once she finds out that a woman isn't safe at home, she should name the problem.
So if the woman says, my husband is beating me, my husband is having sex when I don't want to, they're often not going to use the words that we would use. We would say name the problem. So do name the problem as domestic violence or sexual assault or rape. That helps the woman. It provides information. She can then redefine her own position. We'd also say offer her a referral. Make sure that she knows she can contact the Victorian Police Sex Offences Child Abuse Unit and that they're specialists. We'd also say give her the CASA number, which is quite simple. It's a statewide number. We'd also suggest that they offer her information about domestic violence services. We'd say she needs that information verbally and in written form, because when people are discussing something distressing, they're not always going to recall what you've said later. So having something to take away is useful. And we'd say, follow up. Don't be afraid to bring it up. Ask her. Say, the last time we met, we talked about lack of safety in your home. How are things now? Is there anything I can do? And those few steps let the woman know she's believed. Even if she's not ready to take action right now, there'll come a time when she is ready. And that's what we'd encourage workers to do. I think it's time that the community found a way to listen to us as we name the problem.
Mainstream and all communities coming together. You know, a woman from Sudanese community and Indigenous women saying that we're not going to put up with it.
Men have an absolutely vital role to play in building a world free of men's violence against women.
Because if one of those people, if the doctor had done something, if my mother had done something, if the church had done something, if the neighbours had done something, things would not have got so bad. It only takes one person to stand beside you and say, no, this is not acceptable.
The long version of the DVD is divided into separate chapters to meet the needs of different audiences. Viewed in its entirety, it gives a damning portrait of where we are now legally and morally in regard to this serious crime, and offers clear direction of what to do in our professional and personal capacity. My colleague at Women's Health Goulburn North East, Julie Tyler, played a crucial role as key contact for women from when they first phoned in and throughout the research project, as well as conducting some of the interviews. She's a skilled worker in engaging with women, having just completed the statewide rollout of Women Gathering After the Fires project. This involved over 1,000 women and 48 organisations across Victoria. So here's Julie.
Indication that Rape by a Partner project was important was the overwhelming response to the recruitment advertisements. One ad was placed in each of the regional newspapers. Only one was needed, as we had so many women respond. What stood out was that a lot of the women were older. The rape had happened when they were younger, and for many, I was the first person they'd ever told. Many women said to me, "This is great. Thanks so much for talking about it." So as policymakers, counsellors, advocates and health professionals, how can we improve the way we respond to victims, survivors of intimate partner sexual violence? A number of recommendations emerge from the research, and they guide our response to this question. Firstly, know it exists and name it as rape. Women told us they needed to hear the word. One woman, Kate, said, "When I first started talking to my counsellor, he said," Kate's not her real name, of course, he was raping you. That's how it felt, but I could never say it. It was wrong, and I thought I was a bad, sick person for thinking it was rape. And another, Victoria, told us about a conversation with a health professional. She said what he'd done was a crime. You need to hear that again. It sounds so silly. I considered myself to be a reasonably intelligent person, but I needed to hear that. Our task in releasing the research was, and still is, to raise awareness. It is a task that belongs to all of us. Even the recruitment ads in the local paper have raised awareness, both for the general community, does rape in marriage really happen? And for the women who'd been raped, giving them permission to talk about it. Awareness was raised in a different setting through the launch of the research report by Zoe Morrison, who was on the DVD. It was attended by over 100 people, most of whom were health professionals, police, and other community sector workers. 1,000 copies of the report were distributed, and a further 3,500 PDF copies were downloaded in the first 10 months of being on the website. Some tracking indicates that the story was run in every state, most notably on 2 major radio shows in Melbourne and Sydney. After, it was noted in the Victorian Parliament and cited in key policy documents, including Time for Action and the Australian Law Reform Commission's Improving Legal Frameworks and a National Legal Response. The simplicity of the 4 steps is its strength. Due to the extensive distribution, more than 6,000 postcards and 2,000 posters are on display in libraries and health services across the Hume region, from Nathalia to Toowoomba and up to Toowoomba. A year later, a full-length DVD was launched by Libby Lloyd, Chair of the National Violence Against Women Advisory Group. The event was held in Melbourne in December 2009, with an audience of 70 policymakers, practitioners and bureaucrats. 2,000 copies of the DVD have since been distributed, and it's been viewed on YouTube hundreds of times. With each viewing, awareness is raised. Requests for the DVD come from the US, Canada and the UK. And it was included in a webinar hosted by the Washington Coalition of Sexual Assault. It's on Wikipedia. The ripples continue as the Victorian Legal Aid and the Red Cross requested postcards for their outreach workers. And a new request came a week ago from the Australian Bureau of Statistics to use the DVD in training as they prepare for the next personal safety survey. But as researchers, we know our limits. We can name the problem and help raise awareness and have people referring on to you as the experts, you as you work in domestic violence, sexual assault and soccer units. Tomorrow's session with Jill Duncan and Deb Weston will examine how practitioners can improve response to women. What we have learned from health professionals, though, is that they were often reluctant to raise the issue, hesitant to encourage disclosures. They said they wanted specialist training in response to partner rape, to understand the concept of it as a crime, to know the theory of how it plays out in a reluctance to disclose or report or even leave, and to know the questions to ask and the actions to take with women disclosing partner rape. After learning about partner rape through the report, the DVD or the launches, health professionals told us of their intentions. Be more aware of the possibility of abuse around me. Be more direct in my questioning. Educate social workers, colleagues and clients. Show it to fellow doctors and patients. Show the DVD to midwives to help understand women's response to labour. Use it for training police officers in understanding sexual assault. Inform workers in the court. Distribute it to support workers at specialist family violence courts. Create awareness for young men 18 to 21 years. And use the DVD to inform some aspects of the Men's Behaviour Change Program. We also sought to hold men to account. This research presents to decision makers and the legal sector the reality of a woman being raped by her own partner. The women themselves speak, challenging those who would uphold men's sense of entitlement within a relationship. The criminality of partner rape is clear and stated in the report, the postcards and on the DVDs. Yet, implementation of the law lags. We suspect this results from the complicity of society. The failures of the justice system have been well documented when it comes to delivering justice to women who've been sexually assaulted. The Australian Law Reform Commission noted in its 2010 report on family violence and national legal response. Research has established that not only a small proportion of sexual assaults enter the criminal justice system, and those that do face a range of barriers and filtering mechanisms, which means that few result in a charge, prosecution, or conviction. Christine Nixon captured it on the DVD when she said she and her colleagues would not recommend to someone they loved to take a case of sexual assault to the courts. Only 6 of the 30 police officers consulted said they would advise someone they loved to report. And that's despite 28 of the 30 calling it a serious crime. Their reasons were difficulty in proving it, the lengthy delays in getting into court, and the damaging and disrespectful treatment of women once in court. Women often do not want the man who is their partner and is often the father of their children to be imprisoned. They nevertheless want them to recognise their criminal behaviour and be held accountable for it in some way. One woman said to us, "My mother actually had a very serious discussion with me about killing my ex-husband." A very serious discussion about that. That was quite scary. That was Louise, not her real name. This is a very real scenario in a context where women don't get justice and there is no avenue for justice. Much work has been done in investigating alternatives such as restorative justice, and others here can speak with authority on this. While we claim a ripple effect from this research, we know of at least one explicit outcome in holding men accountable. A front-page article in the Border Mail on the 2nd of April in 2009 explicitly links the rape by a partner research with the woman's decision to report her ex-husband for rape. He was found guilty and imprisoned. And the article states, Mrs. Holmes said attending a partner rape seminar last year and support from her domestic violence caseworker had been instrumental in her decision to go public. Our findings confirm other research showing that as isolation increases, so does the risk of violence for women. There is more opportunity for entrapment and monitoring and more conservative attitudes towards gender roles. Many of you provide services for rural women and no doubt lament the scarcity of services. Today and tomorrow present an opportunity to consider the particular context of rural women when thinking of how to improve our response more generally. In conclusion, research changes things. This research asserts the value of naming intimate partner sexual assault as the crime it is, and provides us with a clear way of responding positively to women affected by it. Today and tomorrow, collectively, we will take it further.